Becoming a parent, no matter if it's done through natural childbirth or through adoption, is one of the biggest decisions in our lives. It must be made wisely, and we must weigh not only the external factors, such as our financial situation or our relatives, but the internal factors as well. All soon-to-be parents have their own hopes, expectations and fears. These factors condition our initial attitude towards the child. When it comes to satisfying physiological and psychological needs of the new family member, the initial attitude can make it a pleasant routine perceived as a privilege, and even inspire the feeling that you have a reason to live. On the other hand, it can become an everyday burden, producing frustration and the neglect of the child. Expectations of soon-to-be parents partially arise from their motivation for having a child. Thus, depending on resulting expectations, motivation can be constructive or destructive. Constructive motivation facilitates establishing a proper environment for the child's development and socialization, and makes the child's well-being a cornerstone, while still accounting for the well-being of the parent. In case of destructive motives, the child is primarily viewed as a means to an end, which generates a toxic environment, preventing the child from adequate development, producing psychological problems, and negatively impacting their future life. Before making a decision, it is well advised to weigh everything and to examine our motives, not only in order to avoid ruining our own lives, but also the life of the new person entrusted to us. To make it easier for potential parents, I'd like to make a list of constructive and destructive motives that are common in regards to the decision to have a child. I'm only trying to touch upon the grounded, everyday social side of it. I will leave philosophical pitfalls for another time. However, let's not forget that real-life situations are complex and dynamic. Motives are intricate and not always reduced to a set of simple elements. My list won't give all the answers, but I hope it will help someone to get their bearings on the subject and understand what deserves their primary attention. I want to emphasize that I'm not trying to shame anyone. I just want to ask future moms and dads to measure twice before cutting once. Constructive motives for parenting are pretty mundane, maybe even trivial to talk about. They account for the interests of both the child and the parents. Most of them are variations of the same thing and seemingly have a touch of traditionalism about them or an appeal to nature. But remember, we're talking about natural, biologically controlled processes, a lot of which proceed automatically once we steer them to the right direction. Don't get too excited, it won't be that easy when we get to the topic of decisions on upbringing, educating and informing a child. But for now, we're dealing with psychological consequences of initial attitude of a parent towards the child. So, constructive motives include desire to have children, fulfillment of parental potential, expanding the family, continuing one's legacy. All these are natural needs and aspirations. To fulfill them is to cooperate with biology. If something introduces a problem at a later time, it's not these motivations. To this list, we can add empty nest syndrome, a condition of mothers and fathers whose children grew up and became independent, leaving the home of the parents, who now fill a void where their children once were. But it's crucial that these things are supported by the following factor: proper conditions for raising a child and abundant resources. In general, 2 or 3 out of the first 5 factors, combined with the 6th, are enough to provide comfort and happiness in the earlier stages of being a parent, so long as they are not interfered with by destructive motives, which are the motives that can poison the lives of both the child and the parents. And there is absolutely no guarantee that with expanding the family, these motives will be fulfilled, while the underlying problem that has produced them will almost certainly get worse. Some of the destructive motives are pretty close to constructive ones. When it is hard to tell the difference, what's important is the prioritization in the mind of a potential parent. Does the potential parent take into account a child's need for love, attention and care, or is a child just an expendable material? Destructive motives consist of loneliness, when a child is intended to keep mom's or dad's company and to satisfy their longing for communication. Attempting to save a marriage, when a child is a means for moral blackmail or is intended to revive feelings that have faded away. If the child is wanted by only one partner in a couple, which means that for the second partner, a child will always be a source for annoyance and jealousy. Pressure from relatives, friends or society, when people have children not because of their own wishes or readiness to be parents, but as an attempt to get others off their case or even fulfill their demands. The notion that a family is not complete without children, in which case expanding a family often comes from fulfilling ideological or religious beliefs, without a personal desire or being ready. Having a child as a domestic helper, securing elderly years, when a child is supposed to be a provider and a nurse for the parents in the future. Another child wanting to have a sister or a brother, when a child is brought to be a doll or a pet for someone. An impulsive decision, when an instantaneous desire is the only thing taken into account, while interests of a future person are ignored. compensating for failed relationship with the previous child, when the new child is more of a second chance than a real person, replacing a deceased child or a child that has been taken away, when the parents unconsciously put onto a new child a responsibility to fill someone else's role, and when the child is constantly compared to someone who the child doesn't even know. In this complicated situation, before making a new attempt in parenting, it is necessary to make sure that we have overcome the tragedy, processed it, and moved on. Professional help is preferable. In case of adoption, it's recommended to get a child of different appearance, different age, and even different gender, in order to minimize transference of our feelings towards someone lost. All constructive and destructive motives listed here equally concern both giving birth to a child and adopting a child. Further motives strictly pertain to adoption. Practicing before having a biological child, when an adopted kid is not perceived as a real child and only temporarily holds the position so that the parent could hone their parenting skills. Pity for an orphan, when instead of care and empathy, there is only an unconstructive emotion of a condescending, distant urge to save a child. Financial incentives, namely reliance on money from the government, or taking a disabled child for begging purposes, attempting to atone for some sins, when a child is taken to become a symbol of one's virtues and help deal with one's own moral failings. Understandably, there are rarely only constructive motives present in real life. It's okay if they are accompanied with rudiments of destructive ones, but it's crucial, before making a final decision, to stop and think. Are we really preparing to become parents for a child, or are we trying to fix some personal problem? Because it's more than likely that in a few years the problem will still not be fixed, while the life is already changed forever, for us as well as an innocent little person.